Good morning. Welcome to another analytics discussion with yours truly. Yours truly? I think that's the right way to say it. Appreciate you watching. The plan here is I'm going to go through some of the things that I put in our analytics notes. So if you haven't read it, this is a part of our monthly data that we deliver out to you guys. And I want to go through several different topics that we're thinking about. And if you are active in the chat and feel like you want a little bit more insights, feel free to add questions and or comments, and I'll make sure that I address them. So first, on the front end of anything that has to do with franchising, we want every franchise to win. That's the objective. That's why you work with us. You say, here's our goal, and we got to figure out what is our strategy and what's our tactics, right? So as we've continued to explore how can we get better at delivery and giving you guys something that will impact your businesses, we've started turning things sideways to start looking at data and analytics to try to lead what our decisions are, whether it's when to invest, how to structure, how to build a story. We've been putting all these things in place. As we've talked about before, this year it was important for us to look at all the data that we have access to and use that as an opportunity to um, try to give some insights into your brand, into brand categories, into the industry in general. So, what we started with this year was we have all these franchisees that we profile, about 40 a month across all of our clients. And those tend to be new signings or openings of what would cause us to profile them. A profile ends up being a questionnaire. We're asking them questions about what was their buying process, how did they even get into becoming a franchisee, and we started asking things like how much time did it take from that first impression to the point that you inquired, so that we can gain these insights and then hopefully cross apply it backwards. So first things first, if we want everyone to win at franchising, then we have to first break it down a little bit differently. And I think unfortunately the industry has created these umbrella statements such as it takes between $8,000 and $12,000 per deal in marketing to get a deal done. Maybe, but that's irrelevant. Like the reality is we have to dive into individual brands, and we can gain insights across all of the brands that we work with, and we can gain insights across categories and investment ranges. But the reality is your data is going to be your data. So if your cost per deal is $50,000, can we continuously move that down? Totally. But will that take understanding of your business model? Absolutely. So when you think about lead generation, it's not just the generation of leads, it's how are we going to get a lead that is going to turn into an application into a deal. And so for your brand, what we have to look at is what is your investment range? How does your business model look? What's the culture? And what's your momentum? So if I had to break it into those four key categories, it starts giving us areas that we can examine and say, how are we going to influence each of these areas? So the investment, not much we can do from our seat other than to give you advice and say, all right, you've jacked up the franchise fee for whatever reason, whether it's for the broker relationships or because your cost of doing business has increased. Um, what does that do to your investment? Does it put you over the edge that makes it a little bit more challenging? If we look at the business model, how much does it cost to buy it, and how much can I potentially make? I will say, as we've studied brands, and I'm not going to call this a flaw, but it's interesting. Item 19 has obviously turned into a giant leveraging point for a lot of franchise brands, but I don't think they always tell the complete story of the investment. So I'll give you a good example. There's a brand that we've worked with for a while in fitness, and they started their franchise journey was out in the suburbs. They didn't go main urban markets first, so their unit level economics were here. And when they moved closer to the bigger cities, it just kept on climbing up. So now the perception to a new franchisee when they buy in is, I bought in at average unit volume of this. I'm moving in closer to or into a higher populated city. My sales are going up. therefore my validation is higher. You've exceeded my expectations. If you think about the stock market, probably the biggest miss that is made by businesses that are on the stock market is creating estimated sales that are higher than actuality. Now, why do they do that? They want to impress the investors and say, this is our target. But when you miss it, the stock price tanks. Now, there's obviously some art to that, art and science to that. But I would cross apply that over to franchising, that oftentimes with an investment structure, it's telling the best story, not the most realistic story. And eventually what happens if franchisees aren't hitting those volumes, the validation will suffer. When validation suffers, the cost per deal goes up because you're going to have to spend more money to convince people that this is the right investment, which I'll get into in a second. So looking at the investment model, your own model, like critique it. Like if you're in franchise sales, look at this and say, are there landmines here, and how do we tell the right story? Which we'll get into telling the right story in a minute. Business model. What is your business model? How is it different from competition? How do you stand out? It is important to have a point of differentiation. We talked about this last time, that the second question we started asking is what pushes the buyer over the edge, and it was culture and the business model. Like that's it. That's the two things that they're evaluating when they get to the finish line. So you need to make sure that you're presenting your business model in a good way. Culture, just mentioned that. Culture is seen in your leadership, your support, your existing franchisees. Are you partners with your franchisees? Do you see them as just widgets? And there's not necessarily a right or wrong to that. It's just what is the influence on the franchise sales front. And then momentum. Sean Fitzgerald has always said, who is franchise legend, has always said that franchise sales is like a locomotive. You stop it or you stall it out, it's hard to get that thing going again until it gets back up to speed. And when you think about the time of impression to inquiry, because of the depth of time it takes to get there, if you've stalled out and you're trying to get sales going again, it's going to take you a while to get there. So before you even get into lead generation, like go get us leads, it's important to look at elements of the business to start setting your own expectations on how is it going to work, because not everybody is cut the same way. Not every business model is the same. And when you break into the equation, the buying process for your brand is going to be very specific to your brand. Again, there's holistic things that you can do, digital, portals, broker community, entrepreneur magazine. Like there's these umbrella themes that capture what you perceive to be a wider audience of people who could prospectively buy. But you have to look at all the elements. It's not just go get me leads, and that's an important qualifier here. And again, like if we want every franchise to win at franchising, then we have to study those business models to know how are we going to impact them in a positive light. So in this note that I sent out, again, like we're super focused on impression to inquiry. Why? If we can get a sense of how long is it going to take for you to get that deal, then all of a sudden we can get a little bit more predictable and say, here's how we can impact you in the highest and best way. So the insight, and this is in this note that that is attached to obviously this webinar, or if you've looked at your monthly report, I'm going to dive into the time and then I'll go back into the budget. The time frame, the average currently is 7.4 months. That's across all the brands that we've pooled franchisees from. And so 7.4 months from impression to inquiry, and that's taking out some of the outliers. Like there's someone that said 10 years. Well, that would screw up the data too much. So we've kept it pretty tight. So 7.4 months is greater than what I typically would say that it's going to take 6 months. And again, not everybody's cut the same way. There are the outliers that move faster. So what we did this time is I said, okay, let's go for best case scenario. How do we find the persona that is willing to move faster than the pack at going from impression to inquiry, so that our franchise brands have the opportunity to get leads faster? And there's another category on top of this too that I want to talk about. But age, 30 to 40, those that we're sticking at around 12% is less than 90 days right now. The average is 7.4 months. but the 30 to 40-year-old range is moving faster through the process. They're going faster from I'm interested or I've learned about your brand to inquiry. So that means, maybe a higher portion goes towards that age range of 30 to 40. And it's not like we're classifying as 30 to 40. These are actual age, like 32, 33, 37. Like they all fit within that time frame. So that was important. We put in this note just a breakdown of a budget on one of our clients, 0 franchises, trying to get lift, $10,875 and 1 penny. 1 franchisee, 2 to discovery day, 4 months into the ad spend. It's just giving us some insight into what is our cost per deal. In this sense, our cost per deal is $10,875 and 1 cent. 2 going to discovery day could lower that potentially a little bit more. This is an investment that's around $100,000. And you can see the variance in spend that's in that email. We tried Franchise Direct. We're going over to Prospect Direct. We're going to try that as a next one. Still, I think the buying process beyond inquiry takes time. So I'm not going to completely dismiss Franchise Direct, that nothing came out of it. We got names. They could be slow in the process. Tire kickers, we talked about that before, but it'll be interesting to see where those folks go. So of those profiles in April, a few buyers under $100,000 went from inquiry to lead, less than 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a few weeks, 2 days, 2 days, 3 weeks, 3 hours was the range there. And one for an investment of $500,000 plus went from impression to inquiry in 3 hours. And he was 32 years old and a customer. That's why I broke down that age. So I thought that was important. There's 7.4 months. And so that's the age range. Another thing that we pulled out was what could have scared you away. And we're asking that question to try to gain insight of what is the scariest part of becoming a franchisee. I would definitely argue that buying a franchise is the toughest thing to buy. Convincing someone to most likely quit a job, invest their life savings into business they have no control over for the dream of building wealth or legacy for their family. So it's pretty tough. So we said, what could have scared you away, or what was a no that turned into a yes as you were going through the process? What's interesting, there were only 3 categories that appeared there as well when you start breaking down all of the feedback, which is about 150 people now. And it was investment, family, and fear of becoming a first-time franchisee. I was trying to come with IFF or FIF, franchise if franchise. I don't know, trying to come up with something. But you have those three scare tactics. So now, if I'm you, that turns into insights that we need to make sure we have a piece of content that if you have franchisees, you take 3 franchisees that talk about they had a fear of the investment going into it. Now they're scaling their business. Here's their story. I think that's valuable. And I always use 3 as the general route of let's get 3 people quoting. That's enough to create some credibility. Family, 3 people that got over, or 1 if you have it. But the family was like, their spouse was like, I don't know, but now they support it and they're in it and they're intrigued in it. And then fear of becoming a franchisee for the first time. That's an opportunity to take first-time franchisees and tell their stories as well. So what we're trying to do here is say, 1, we know the buying process, or we know that impression to lead has taken 7.4 months on average across all brands currently for this year. And we know the scare tactics. So let's try to build ammo to lessen both of those times. The other area of opportunity on the average time that I forgot to mention is competitor brands. Take a Jersey Mike's, sold out all over the country. If you were to put a tracker on them and track their most recent openings in that market, call it even in a concentric circle around that location, there's going to be buzz. People are going to still inquire about owning that franchise because someone did it in that community. They've opened up the unit, but now that area is sold out. So you can take an insight on competitor brands or similar investment ranges and put tracking on it to say when there's an opening or a signing, I need to press down some of my spend in that market because people are going to be inquiring. We need to somehow get in front of that audience, and that's somewhat of how search works, or you have the ability to get in front of them as well. Okay, so those are some of those insights. So what are they asked typically from you guys or any franchise brand? We want deals fast. We think leads are the answer, but really it's not the lead that we want. We really want the application to show quality leads. So we want quality leads that are going to close faster and turn into great franchisees. Like that's ultimately what we're going for. So now, if we're armed with a piece of content, video, regular content on comfortable with investment, comfortable with family, comfortable with the fear of becoming a first-time franchisee, we've added that to our toolbox. Now you think about your sales process. How can we answer that in the sales process? So call one, are we making them feel comfortable? Are we giving them advisory? And are we handing them a plan? I think the plan piece ends up being an important part that misses from the sales process. If any of you have a good one, I would love to see it. But I've inquired, are you giving them, here's a timeline. Here's a timeline PDF that shows from this moment to close, it's 90 days. Here's what you should do in that process, whether it's validation, whether it's securing financing, whatever it ends up being. Are you giving them that piece? Are you giving them that takeaway that guides them through? Think about buying a car. When someone's buying a car and you walk into a car dealership, I think, and they give you this packet on here's the colors that you can choose from, here's the wheels, you can get it at the auto shows. They're giving the user something they perceive is going to go sit on their desk or counter at home and keep them thinking about that process. Take that same thing. What are you giving your franchise candidates? Is it a tool that is useful? Is it a PDF that's just a brand PDF? Think about how you can give them a useful tool. Now, if we go back to investment, family, and fear, first-time franchisee, maybe that tool is a little bit different. This beautiful one-pager could talk about how you overcome the fear of becoming a first-time franchisee, what you need to know about how we're going to support you to make sure you're not by yourself. It could talk about how you can involve your family in this and building legacy. It could talk about the investment and how we've worked really, really hard to get the investment right so that when you get your first unit open and growing, you can now scale it. So the bottom line there, and toolbox, building up this toolbox, piece of content on investment, family, and fear, and then going through your sales process, making sure how are you making them feel comfortable? How are you showing them that you're an advisor? And what plan are you giving them at that point? That starts giving you a good pathway to winning. Okay, so next, keep going down this, and I'm just going to open this up in case you guys have any questions. It doesn't look like there's any there currently, but if you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and put it into the chat, and I will make sure to address it. Okay, so then I started thinking about the candidate journey, because I think in order to build the right toolbox, you got to think through what stages in the candidate journey can we impact to try to shorten the sales cycle to make them feel comfortable with opportunities. So first, the candidate X knows nothing about the brand, knows nothing about franchising, or both. So that's at the super top of the funnel. So do you have a way to educate what the brand is? Most likely, if you're a consumer-facing brand, it's the consumer experience. If you're not a consumer-facing brand, it's obviously your website. And then knows nothing about franchising. It's interesting, and shame on us too. It's something that we need to do with our clients' websites. Is we need to make sure there is some general piece of what is franchising. And that's a piece that we need to build for 1851 so that we have either a resource center or something to educate the buyer on what is franchising. We do have this free masterclass that is at the top of 1851 University, but I think there's an area of opportunity, because if one of the fears is fear of becoming a franchisee for the first time, then we need to give them something that is holistic that helps them get over that. Okay, so knows nothing about the brand, knows nothing about franchising. Now I know something about the brand. I understand this is a franchise. And so you look at what are the next layer, and they love the brand. So we hear this a lot in these profile answers is I tried the burger, I loved it, I was totally bought in. Oh, and they were a franchise. Now I'm intrigued by franchising. So what do? They go start researching the category. They ask themselves, can they afford this? This is where the investment starts coming in. Can I actually afford to become a franchisee? Now, some brands, and this is almost led by the broker community, are saying, let's qualify someone that can own 3 units, because if we qualify them that way, then they're definitely qualified to own 1 unit. And hopefully, if they scale their business, they will be able to grow their business with us and scale this business into having 3 units. And if you qualify them on the front end to have the financial bandwidth or the grit to become a 3 unit franchisee, then you can leverage that and put that to work, obviously, as they start scaling their business. So they research the category, they research franchising. They're looking at success rates, they're looking at profitability, they're looking at proof of brand. And we're seeing this in some of the profile answers, again, trying to pull out some more data on this. Then they get into researching the brand. Product, investment are certainly part of it. But interesting, I've been watching Google Analytics in real time on several of our client sites, and they tend to, if there's a tab on leadership, tend to go to this. Now, this is not a perfect insight, but I do think it's important. They do look at leadership as a part of what they're buying into. Tenure, experience in category, commitment to the brand, turnover rate, how this team is going to support me in my pathway to becoming a successful franchisee. So all really good stuff that needs to be a part of your storytelling. Maybe that comes after inquiry. It doesn't necessarily have to be loaded up on a website, but it's something good to note. I think the pathway of least resistance is a good video with the leadership. Could be just one person on what is the vision of the brand for the next year and or the next quarter, quarterly updates. There's a way to put this into a process that can work as it relates back to content. They go and they start studying the process of becoming a franchisee. They study what is the business model going to look like. Can they get the financing, and they get comfortable with what is the outcome that they're looking for. They inquire. So you think about all that stuff that has to happen before inquiry. This is where generally, when we say 7.4 months, or that's what the data is reporting currently. That might be long, but maybe they're like, this is a cool brand. They go back, they don't really think about it. Their boss gives them a hard time on something. They then come back. That's probably what softens that process. It's not like from start to finish they go, knows nothing about the brand, knows nothing about franchising, studies those, loves the brand, intrigued by franchising, researches category, researches franchising, researches the brand, studies the business, and then inquires. It's not like it's done in a 2-week period. Once they inquire, I think it's important to just look at where are they going to get comfortable with. Obviously, discovery days is a part of the process for many brands. They're going to look at the FDD, any landmines in there. They're going to look at validation. They want to hear franchisees saying, go do this. You got this. They're going to look at financing. And I do think there's value in having connections there. And that could go into some of your planning docs. And then they jump. And so when you break it down like that, and I'm sure there's other elements that need to be discussed as a part of this, but I'm obviously trying to start simplify and take some of the data that we're pulling and say, okay, now here's what the game plan is. I think it's okay. Like, it's the pathway to building the right toolbox is actually viable. There's a good pathway to doing so. What we're going to be pushing as we go forward, the next step for us is we're going to start taking brand and investment and trying to pin those specifically. So for our clients, if you have openings and signings, we're going to be trying to build this out specifically for our clients because we're already pulling the data. So I can take, here's the last 10 franchisees and try to come up with an insight. We do these persona projects where we dive deeper in with franchisees, longer conversations, video conversations that we've done with several brands. That accelerates the process because we go backwards with existing franchisees. But here, we're going to now break this down for individual brands because we feel that's another asset that we can give back to you that can be a part of our process, costs no more money, but gives us some good insights that we're able to use to leverage for this. So we're going to continue to work on that. And then because we're going to study now investment ranges, we'll be able to break it down by category and investment ranges on how these franchisees are behaving, which will give us yet another insight that hopefully we can help guide you with. I know it sucks to hear 7.4 months. What that means is it's May. We're talking about all efforts from now on average are converting in January of next year. And I think that the toughest part of spending money without an immediate return is just that. The bigger brands have no problem with it. An emerging brand really needs to get some early wins. So early wins, we've got to keep looking at how do we get win 1, 2, and 3, and then focus on the long term. We're going to continue to try to find pathways of least resistance. But that's that. Trying to give you as much honest and real feedback as we can to make sure that you guys have at least the tools to give you the most fighting chance at winning at franchising. Again, that's our intent. I don't care what the brand is. We're definitely selective. We've said no to prospective clients because the viability of the brand is weak and the leadership's vision is not aligned with what they're going to be able to accomplish. We're fine with them going to another business because I don't think we can win for them. But the brands that we do work with, we believe they can win. And we're going to continue to find the best way to help them that we can. So appreciate all of you. I know I'm just talking to myself into a video, but thank you for paying attention. If you're watching this in the future, hopefully you gained some nuggets out of this. And again, feel free to reach out to me or our account team to start building this into a plan. I think there'll be great value in starting to build the toolkit. It doesn't have to be built overnight. It can be built over time. Thanks all. Have a great weekend. Friday the 13th. Don't get spooked. We can all do this. Yeah.